Bourne Identity is a film that I always thought was good for what it is. I mean, it's not the best spy thriller I've ever seen, but it's realistic. And that's something to take away from this film. Nonetheless, though, this is a film that I still enjoy at the end of the day. Directed by Doug Liman, this film is based on a 1980 novel of the same name. Matt Damon stars Jason Bourne. He's a man suffering from amnesia, and he's trying to discover his true identity, but that's a conspiracy within the CIA. And so all these people come after him, and obviously he has to go on the run. You know, I feel like we've seen this plot so many times over the years in other action thrillers that it becomes redundant up to this point. I'm not saying this is a bad film, but I really feel like a realistic take on this spy thriller hurts this film to some degree. Nonetheless, I think still this film is good. It reminds me of the first Mission Impossible film where there's not a whole lot of action, but when the action does show up, it is quite of a thrill ride. If anything, acting from Matt Damon, Brian Cox, Julia Stiles, and others, they did a good job in this movie. Yes, this movie gets slow in certain parts, especially towards the middle of this film. It slows down, and it's not as much action as you want it to be, but you know, for a realistic spy thriller, it does its job of telling a pretty good story. You see, I always thought the Jason Bourne films were something of themselves. They were like James Bond, only not as outrageous as those movies were in the late 90s. And this film came out a few months before Die Another Day. And so what you have here, you have a spy film where you can really appreciate the cinematography, the visuals, just about everything you liked about this film. If anything, this film's not everybody's cup of tea. If you like big explosions, that type of action film, this movie is not it. But it is a intriguing concept, but I think it doesn't explore the amnesia premise enough. Nonetheless, though, this is a film that I highly enjoyed, and it is remembered still to this day as being a good movie. You know, I find it interesting that Doug Liman originally went to actors such as Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Tom Cruise, and Brad Pitt. Those guys already were established movie stars, you know, when it comes to action films up to this point. So when he went with Matt Damon, it was a very interesting choice. Matt Damon has his own acting style, and it works for this film. I mean, I want to know more about the Jason Bourne character. Even though this film is not action-packed like you'll see in those other films that the other actors that I just talked about, this film was more realistic, like I mentioned beforehand, and the story was well thought out. If anything, I don't think I really have any negatives here. Oh, actually, I do have a negative, the lack of a villain. This villain is, well, a villain really isn't present throughout this film. And this movie suffers from it. It doesn't make the movie bad, but if we had an established villain with a backstory, then this film would have been more interesting, in my opinion. I'm giving this film an 8 out of 10. Not a bad way to start off this franchise. I know this movie clearly is not for everybody. There are some negative reviews on this film out there, but I enjoy it. Rewatching it for the first time in years, it was a surprisingly enjoyable experience. What can I say? This film caught my attention and kept me entertained throughout it, and I enjoyed the story. Now, if anything, I think if they would have tried to pack as much action as possible, then we would have had a pretty overall mess of a film. Thankfully, that didn't happen here. And that's my review of The Bourne Identity. Okay, leave your comments down below in the section and let me know what you thought about this film. Do you love it, hate it, or in the middle? Alright, up next is my review of The Bourne Supremacy. Alright, this is Slum Guy 172 saying, peace out.
Extreme ways are back again, extreme places I didn't know. I broke everything new again, everything that I know. I threw it out the windows, came along.